Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. An insightful session on a topic that will become rapidly, you can say, central to the business strategy of reporting, ESG reporting in line with the GRI standards. I'm Mohammad Farooq Siddiqui, Marketing Initiative Specialist at the Pakistan Stock Exchange, and I'm delighted to be your host today. As sustainability continues to shape the future of business globally, investors and stakeholders are placing increasing importance on the transparency on transparency and accountability. To aid companies in aligning with these evolving expectations, PSX has developed the PSX Primer on ESG reporting, a practical guide that offers insight into adopting ESG principles within the Pakistani corporate sector. This primer also addresses the integration of GRI standards, a globally recognized framework for sustainability reporting, making it a little easier for companies to communicate their sustainability efforts clearly and consistently. Today we have uh, Today we are privileged to have with us Mr. Mohammad Imran. He is the founding executive director of CSR Center Pakistan. Mr. Imran brings his experience in sustainable development, CSR, and ESG standards, and he will lead us in trying to better understand the significance of ESG reporting, how the PSX primer can aid in aligning with the GRI standards, and practical approaches for implementing these practices to which will foster responsible business in the country. Our goal for this session is to empower you with the knowledge and tools to advance your organization's ESG journey, ensuring that your reporting is not only in line compliant with the latest standards, but is also meaningful for your stakeholders. After the presentation, please feel free to share your questions and thoughts in the Q&A box as we move throughout the session. We will try to answer the questions at the end of the session. With that, let me invite Mr. Imran Saab for the presentation. Mr. Imran Saab, over to you.
Thank you, Farooq sir. Let me share my screen. Yeah, my presentation is visible.
Ji, sir.
Okay, thank you. So today's topic is about ESG reporting and linking PSX primer on ESG and GRI standards. We will be starting with a little introduction about myself and or my entity, and then what is ESG reporting before linking the ESG report with or ESG primer with the GRI standards or anything, any standard. You need to first understand what is ESG reporting and why it is becoming relevant at the moment or becoming mainstream, and what are the reporting frameworks available at the moment, keeping in view the discussion about impact reporting as well as discussion about the financial impact or the impact on the community and society. Then we will be having slides on PSX primer on ESG, that how PSX has developed this primer and what components are covered within this ESG primer. Then we will discuss about the methodology, and we have created some examples as well for each of the companies that how they can link the ESG primer KPIs with the relevant GRI standards while developing their report. And as Farooq mentioned, there will be question and answer session at the end of this presentation. To start with, I am representing CSRCP. I am the founding executive director of CSRCP, stands for Corporate Social Responsibility Center Pakistan. We established in 2010 to basically promote and foster the non-financial disclosures within the main reporting and enable companies as well as the government and the advocacy bodies to understand that how these factors can be helpful in decision making, not only for the investors, but for the policymakers as well. We are a specialized sustainability advisory firm working in core areas of ESG and sustainability advisory and reporting, as well as providing third-party review services for the ESG reports that have been prepared by the companies. We do provide training as well on this topic, and we carry out research. And as an initiative under this research category, we have created a linkage document which connects this PSX primer on ESG with the GRI standards. The same linkage document has been developed for the SCP ESG guidelines as connecting with them with those guidelines with the GRI standards. To start with, first we have to see what is ESG and how it has evolved. If we mind back, that starting with 1970s, There was a momentum about the environmental compliance, mainly due to the E&P sector. There were, or the chemical sector. There were the issues. There were pollution or like those issues that raised toward the environmental compliance, starting with 1970s. That was then moved toward the philanthropy perspective in 2000 across the globe. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, it prolonged a lot till you can say till 2020. We are mainly focused on the philanthropy perspective in Pakistan. That is now going to be changed toward the ESG understanding or ESG evolution or taking into account this perspective of the environment, social, and governance. But until now, there was mainly focus on the philanthropic perspective. Moving toward the triple bottom line, the concept was developed on the triple bottom line, three Ps, that was the profit, planet, and people. That how companies are impacting or how companies are creating value for these three Ps, that is the people, planet, and profit perspective. And then it moved toward the impacts on economy, environment, and people with the launch of SDGs in 2015, as well as with the launch of the GRI standards in 2016. This debate was moved toward the impact on economy, environment, and people, and then coming into the mainstream. Previously, it was not in the mainstream. Companies were preparing their environmental report. They were ISO certified, or they were getting some activities, but that were not in the mainstream. Those were aligned in a separate section of the report, or you can say separate CSR report, mainly focused on the philanthropy perspective. But keeping in view these developments, TBL, and the impacts on economy and perspective, this became coming into the mainstream at the global level. And in Pakistan, from 2015 onward, it is also going to be in the mainstream that there are new regulations that have been now, of the upcoming regulation, just like the PSX primer, they have, at the moment, they are voluntary guidelines, and the SCCP ESG guidelines. Apart from that, there is a change in the code of corporate governance. So the momentum has been on the build that is going to be pushing this agenda into the mainstream of ESG for the organizations, that they have to identify these factors and they have to understand these factors within their reporting. And in addition to that, there was impact perspective, that how organizations were impacting the outer world, but uh, keeping in with the investor focus, they need a specific risk information, that how those impacts or those risks are impacting the organization, that was defined as the sustainability related financial implications. And that has given rise to the development of ISSP, that is the International Sustainability Standard Board. And they have lastly launched the two standards, IFRS 1 and S2, which we'll be looking at in the coming slides. So this is starting from the environmental to philanthropy to the trivial and then toward the impact, and now taking into account the sustainability related financial implication. Here comes an important question also arises, that whether uh, companies need to focus on these impact side, or whether the company need to focus on sustainability related financial implications only. Uh, where the question can be better answered, and for the company's understanding and for educating them, they need to focus on both elements. And if you see the ESG primer as well, or ESG guidelines as issued by the SECP, these take into account the holistic view of the impact as well as the financial implication. We'll be looking at the next slide as well. So previously there was financial reporting that is there for, I guess, more than a century now, that is 100 plus years. Then there was a sustainability reporting focusing on the impact materiality. That was the to mention that how companies can create, are creating impact or can create value for the outer world, keeping in view the three broader streams of sustainability. That was the economy, that was the environment, and that was the society. That has been a change toward the people as well on the human rights. It was inside out impact. This is called inside out, inside implication for the company on the inside out impact perspective, that how companies impacting the outer world. Uh, but with the financial implication taking into account the investor need, the new dimension arises, that sustainability reporting financial materiality. That apart from the wider context, companies, investors require that what factors are material for company in the financial terms, that how those are impacting the company's profit, profitability, company's position, company's prospects in the shorter, medium, and longer run. So they put a lens on that sustainability reporting to make it some financial materiality. And this led to the outside in impact, that how the outer factors are impacting the organization. And And this is now called a broader term. This is called the ESG perspective, that the investors are mainly focused on the outside in impact. But some investors, well, not all investors, but some investors are mainly focused on this financial materiality. But keeping in with the larger context, investors are also focused that how companies are impacting the outer world, because those impacts will be translated into the risk for the company. So ESG evolution starting, and you can say at the broader level or the global level, this is also being now matured or materializing that where to focus on. Previously, it was for the company side or it was for the investor side, that whether they have to just focus on the center wise, that is the financial materiality, or they have to take into account the impact materiality perspective as well. I guess this will be make more clarification for the companies that are going to start their journey, keeping in view this ESG revolution that has been taking place in Pakistan in form of these guidelines, as well as the upcoming IFRS 1 and S2 promulgation by the SECP. That the broader context is that they have to focus keeping in view the financial materiality as well as the impact materiality perspective. And what ESG reporting is mainly, ESG represents the sustainability factor that are material to short, medium, and long-term enterprise value, which I was also referring again previously, that these are the factors that are financially material perspective, because keeping in with the enterprise value perspective, this looks toward the financial factors that will affect the company's health, that may be in form of the profit and loss expenses, that may be in form of the revenue generation, further that opportunity perspective, that may be impacting the balance sheet items or impacting the future cash flows of the organization. And the investment community mainly uses this term, the ESG perspective. They assess basically how the companies perform on their key environmental, social, and governance factors affecting their financial performance. That is also covered in this ESG primer that has been developed by the PSX, where they have defined those terms on which the companies will be compared on different factors, that how those are impacting their financial health, and how the company's financial health is being compromised, keeping in with the performance of those elements. So what sustainability reporting is? Sustainability reporting is basically from the concept of impact reporting. This is the how organization publicly disclose its economic, environmental, and social impacts, and hence its positive and negative impacts as well toward the sustainable development. That how companies are contributing toward the goal of sustainable development through creating a positive impact, making a positive contribution, or making a negative contribution that may lead toward the negation of the sustainable development, and that comes into the a negative impact on the sustainable development agenda. And these reporting practices, when shared with the investors, with the wider stakeholders, are discussing the organizational impacts, that how organization is involved with those impacts, how organization is managing those impacts, and how organization is performing against its, comparing with its peers, or at the industry level or at the global level, that leads toward the transparent organization and becoming then help to the responsible organization that is going to become transparent with its stakeholders. That how it is contributing toward these goals. I guess previously PSX had a webinar on that as well, that was focusing on the green washing concept, because sustainability reporting is also having a problem with that, that companies make a bold claim in that perspective, and that may lead to the greenwashing, making a bold claim without the responsible or without the supportive evidence. So it is the crux of the sustainability reporting, that you have to become transparent with your stakeholders by adequately disclosing your impacts and your approach toward managing those impacts. So these were the ESG and sustainability reporting, but the question arises for the organizations that, okay, to start with which framework, because there are alphabet soup of frameworks that are available at the international as well as at the national level. That to start with, companies have to focus on which standard, because it also raises a question in that perspective when companies really start or are already working on that, whether it is compulsory to have multiple frameworks by followed, or it is necessary to have only one framework that need to be followed. So I have divided those frameworks into the impact and opportunity perspective and impact focus perspective, because ESG is primarily focused on the risk perspective and sustainability is focused on the impact focus perspective. So there are some standards that are focused on the double materiality perspective, keeping in view the impact as well as the opportunity focus. So under international, we have IFRS 1 and S2 that have been launched in 2022. 2023, and in Pakistan currently there are a consultation being run by the SCCP that whether these need to be implemented from the coming year or the afterwards. Then there is SSB standards. That is now part of the ISSB. ISSB stands for International Sustainability Standard Board, that is developing the S1 and S2 standards. And there is integrated reporting framework as well that is now becoming part of ISSB. We have a separate slides on these, so I will focus on there. So impact, there are under impact focus, there are some frameworks or standards. There is a GRI standard, then UNGC 10 principles, SDGs, and World Economic Forum stakeholder capitalism matrix. And we have also a double materiality focus standard as well at the moment, but that is applicable in Europe. That is the ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standard. And at the national level, we have risk and opportunity impact focus that the ESCCP ESG guidelines take into account not only the financial implication, but also take into account the company's impact on the wider context of economy, environment, and society. And then there's a PSX primer on ESG, which we will be discussing today. And there's a PSX minimum SDGs for listed companies as well that have been launched in 2020 to assist companies to report on their performance on the 6 SDGs and the 32 core indicators. From the international perspective, this is the IFRS 1, that is the impact and opportunity perspective. It is mainly focused from the investor community that is required the financial information. It definitely can be general requirement for disclosure of sustainability related financial information only. And it requires information in the 4 subcategories, that is the governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. It asks companies to come up with the disclosure information to identify that what are their governance processes to identify sustainability-related risk and opportunities that can affecting the financial position, and what are the procedures the entity uses those and monitor the oversight function, you can say, for the governance of these sustainability-related risk and opportunities. And then it required companies to report on its strategy, that how companies managing those sustainability-related risk and opportunities. What's its strategy? What's its resilience to be of such extent that it can manage those sustainability-related risks and it can reap the benefit of opportunities. And there is a risk management, that how company identify, assess, prioritize, and monitor these risks, and whether this risk management is part of the company's enterprise risk management system, or whether there's a separate risk management system for the sustainability related risk and opportunities. Because currently, because these are the new standards, so most of the companies have risk management systems that are primarily focused on the financial perspective, only keeping in view the markets, legal, technology, and related risks, and they lack the context of the sustainability related risk and opportunities. So it requires whether those risks and opportunities are part of this risk management system, whether those are identified separately. Then it requires metrics and targets, that how companies report on the performance on those identified sustainability related risks as well as sustainability related opportunities. And for this, they have referred to the substandard, that is the SCSB standard, which we have already referring. But in the next slide as well, we have seen that there is a CSB standards. So it required companies, when they have identified their sustainability related risk and opportunity, to report on their performance on sustainability related risk and opportunity by using some specific standards, and whether they have set targets and how they are going to meet those targets as well. So S1 was primarily focused on the sustainability related risk and opportunities. That is a broader context and contain general requirements for disclosure of sustainability related risk and opportunities. And then there is again risk and opportunity perspective standard is, that is the IFRS 2, that is the climate related disclosure. Previously, S1 was focused on the general requirements, but S2 is primarily focused on the climate related risk and opportunities only. Required information in the 4 subcategories as well. That is the governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets, but specifically focused on the climate related risk and opportunities, because climate is a big issue these days that is impacting, that is creating opportunity for companies as well as creating risk for opportunities for the company, just like for the E&P sector. It's a big nightmare that for climate is basically going to change their business model as well. By reducing the emissions, they have to switch toward the cleaner technologies. Under its strategy and risk management, it requires companies to come up with the scenario analysis as well, that how company is resilient toward those climate-related risk and opportunities, and what is its strategy to handle those risks and opportunities. And under metrics and targets, it requires disclosures of companies' GHG emissions, that is Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, using the GHG protocol, as well as there are some proportionality mechanisms are available or some reliefs are available for the companies for the first year. But these two standards are expected to become the global baseline for the financial community perspective, reporting on the financial implication of these sustainability-related risk and opportunities, and are expected to be launched in coming year. And the companies need to be geared up to these standards. And these are developed based on the TCFD, that is Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosure Requirements. And if any company has already worked on that TCFD, that will be well prepared to adopt these standards. Then we have from the impact and risk opportunity perspective, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board standards. These are the SASB standards. These were developed in US mainly to meet the 10K requirements of the US companies that was focusing on the investor community specific information. It was with the objective of manage and communicate financial material sustainability information to their investors. But now it has been under the domain of the SASB, is the ICSB. IFRS Foundation has taken this, and this SASB is now part of IFRS 1 and S2. Under S1, as specifically required that when company has to identify sustainability related risk and opportunity, in addition to doing its own activity or to analysis, to get peer analysis, to see the industry perspective, to see the material issues prevalent at the company level, it requires companies to consult with the SCSB standard for their companies. There are 77 industries, I guess, and more than uh, many metrics are there. So companies are required to identify the relevant industry, and they have to focus that they have to see what are the sustainability related risk and opportunities that may be devised from the taken out from that SCSB standard from the S1. But S2 also required refers to this SCSB standard for industry-based guidance on implementing climate-related disclosures. So SCSB standards are there. Previously, it was these were the main standard for the investor community perspective, but now they are under the domain of IFRS Foundation and ISB. So they are going to work on that, and they're going to basically upgrade those standards as well. So companies, while adopting this IFRS 1 and S2, they have to refer to SSB standards to identify the material financial information for their sector or for their company, to identify what topics are material and what information they to be reporting. Then we have integrated reporting framework. There was a misconception at the previously that this IR has been deleted or it has become obsolete. But now this is part of IFRS Foundation as well. This is basically a very good tool to communicate that how companies create value while making impact. Because this was also focused from the financial community perspective. It required concise communication about the organization strategy, its governance, its performance and prospect in the context of external environment. That how it creates, it preserves, or erode value for short, medium, and long term, mainly focusing on the financial community perspective. But companies can use this integrated reporting framework with the other impact-based reporting framework as well to showcase that how those impacts lead to the creation of value for the different stakeholders in the different capital sets, because there are 6 capitals under this integrated reporting framework. Those are in the next slide there. It requires companies to basically identify that how it creating value, keeping in view the financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social, and natural capital. These are using inputs, keeping in view the risk and opportunities that have been in the external environment, and by applying the governance strategy and its business activities, what output is generated and what outcomes are that may lead toward the uh, erosion of value, that may lead toward the preservation of value, and that may lead toward the creation of value. And it may be possible that under one capital value is created, and for another capital a value may be eroded. So it's a very good tool for the companies to basically communicate that how companies can communicate through their activities, through their impact generation, that keeping in with these 6 capitals, what value is generated by the company over the financial year and where value has been eroded. So these are 3 risk and opportunity perspective standards, and now we'll move toward the GRI standards that are the impact reporting. A GRI standard is the impact reporting standard. These have been divided into the universal, sector, and topics standards. These will be primarily we'll be discussing while linking with the PSX primer. There are universal standards; those are applicable to each and every organization that claims that it is preparing report within accordance with GRI standards. Then there are some sector standards there because sectors have some sector specifications, just like under their GRI 11, that is for oil and gas, then 12 for agriculture and mining, 13 is for mining, and some other are under development, just like textile and apparel and financial sector. Then there are topic standards. These are the topics which every entity identifies as that may be material risk or opportunity for the entity. And for communicating the information or the KPI against that specific topic, the company need to identify the topic which is relevant under the topic specific standard and take account the disclosure requirement from there and report on those. So these standards are basically enable organization to identify and to communicate the significant impacts, not all impacts. It is a significant impacts. Materiality is also there. So significant impacts and how company is managing those impacts. Then there are universal UNGC 10 principles. These 10 principles are for the four subcategories. That is the anti-corruption, human rights, labor standards, and environment. And these require communication and progress by the companies which are member of the UNGC. That how those companies can are implementing those 10 principles within their domain and within their influence sphere of influence, and what is the progress over the years. Then we have SDGs as well. SDGs were previously UNGC, UN SDGs were developed previously. That was the Millennium Development Goals previously were developed by the governments for the governments. But these SDGs were developed with the association and within consultation of the private sector. And now it is expected that private sector showcase that how they are supporting those SDGs. And for that activity, there are two available guides that businesses can use. First is as integrating the SDGs into corporate reporting, that how those SDGs can be integrated into the reporting and for identifying the opportunities, for identifying the action items to contribute toward those SDGs. And then another in focus guide that was addressing investor needs in business reporting on SDGs. These require companies to understand the SDGs first. What are the relevant SDGs for them? Then defining prioritize, that is the identifying relevant or priority SDGs for the company. Because all 17 SDGs may be relevant for the company, but it's not necessary that those are significantly relevant for the company and company is expected to work on all those. It is not possible for company as well. So they have to identify the core SDGs and then setting goals against those core SDGs, integrating into their systems, policies, procedures, that how they can work on those SDGs and then they can make contribution toward those goals, and then reporting and communicating the progress to the stakeholders. Then we have World Economic Forum stakeholder capitalism matrix. These are focused from the principle of governance, planet, people, and prosperity. And these again 3P concept, but keeping in view the disclosure requirements from different standards. There are 55 metrics under this WF stakeholder capitalism matrix. There are 21 core metrics and 34 expanded metrics. Some companies at the global level as well as in Pakistan national level, they are following this WF stakeholder capitalism matrix, but these are mainly the disclosure requirements are mainly from GRI and PRI, that is the principle for responsible investment and some other. So if companies are working on those disclosures, they can easily meet this WF stakeholder capitalism matrix requirement. And then the last one, that is the European Sustainability Reporting Standard, that is from the double materiality perspective. Previously, we were discussing from the risk and opportunity perspective and then impact perspective. So this is taking into account the both perspective, which require companies to report on governance, strategy, impact, risk, and opportunity management, and metrics and targets on those material matters that are material from the double materiality perspective, keeping in with the impact materiality as well as the financial materiality. And the financial materiality is basically that is how the externalities, which we have already discussed, that how externalities are impacting the company. That the primary audience is the investor community. And from the environmental and social materiality, that is the impact materiality perspective, that how companies impacting the climate. That is an example of that. And their primary audience has a wider audience that is consumers, civil society, employees, and investors. So moving toward SCCP ESG guidelines, uh, these are the at national level. SCCP has promulgated these guidelines uh, 2 months back, and these guidelines are focused on the comprehensive resource for assessing companies to how they can integrate the ESG within their business strategy and provide a thorough understanding of the significance of ESG benefit for the companies that by adopting these practices, what benefits companies will reap as a result of that, and then incorporating ESG factors into business operation and reporting process. And it also guide that consideration categorized into governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics targets, keeping in view and taken into account both perspective of the risk perspective as well as the impact perspective. From the risk perspective, they have taken into account the governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets on the basis of IFRS 1 and S2. And then KPIs have been developed, keeping in view the three broader categories of environment, social, and governance that are mostly aligned with the GRI standards. Then we have PSX primer on ESG. This is also a comprehensive resource for the listed companies that how they can integrate ESG within their business strategies. A very comprehensive document on that, and it helps companies to identify the risk and opportunities that may be prevalent in for their respective sector. And again, thorough understanding of significant benefits and disclosure are categorized into environment, social, and governance categories. Then we have PSX minimum SDGs for listed companies. In 2020, PSX have launched these 6 SDGs with 32 indicators that require companies which are willing to compete from the perspective of top 25 companies award. So they have to report on these 6 SDGs. Previously, there was I guess, relaxation on that. They can report on minimum two, and currently as well, they can report on minimum two. But if companies are working on broader categories, they can report on six, and they can meet the 32 criteria as well. And it requires companies to report on SDG, the SDG report that requiring that how companies managing those SDGs, what is management approach, and then the information about the disclosures that is basically in the form of KPIs that have been referred by the PSX for those SDGs. So after having a brief introduction, a brief overview of these standards which can be used for this reporting, now we are going to narrowing down toward the linking ESG primer on ESG and GRI standards, that how PSX primer, how we have linked that primer with the GRI standards, because in Pakistan, mostly companies are following GRI standards for their reporting. Uh, and they can, it will be quite easy for those companies to identify and to map that how those disclosures which are already being reported by them can help to meet these ESG primer requirements as well. So we have analyzed the PSX ESG disclosures against GRI standards to first identify what are the relevant standards. And then we have identified disclosures. After identifying the standards, we have PSX identified the disclosures are mapped against disclosure and relevant GRI standards if there is a disclosure requirement in the PSX ESG primer. So we have identified that, okay, in this standard, which disclosure meets this specific requirement. And then we have carried out mapping at the requirement level as well in GRI standards, because there are in the GRI disclosures, there are some requirements, there are some guidance, and there are some recommendations. So for requirement level, we have mapped those disclosures that, okay, for under this disclosure, this specific requirement meets this PSX ESG primer requirement. And there were instances where disclosure requirement was not available in the GRI standard, which were required by the PSX primer. So we have mentioned the explanation or reason for that as well. Based on our work, we have developed this interoperability consideration for PSX primer on ESG when applying GRI standards for sustainability reporting. So this document is available on our website as well. This links ESG disclosure with GRI standards, high level of connectivity is established, and direct disclosure level as well as the sub-requirement level disclosures have been mentioned. And this link can take into account the topic specific disclosure as well as the universal disclosures as well, because some disclosures were not available in the topic specific, or some disclosures may be met by keeping in view these topic specific as well as some universal standards as well. And disclosure explanation was also provided where disclosures were not available. So we have created some examples as well from three categories of environment, social, and governance. From under environment, there was a requirement under the PSX ESG metrics and measurement. There was a requirement carbon GHG emission, the total amount of carbon and greenhouse gas emission in metric tons. So we have identified that this GHG emission, the topic specific standard is GRI 305. So we have identified the specific topic standard, and to report on that total amount of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, we have identified that there are three disclosure topics. Disclosure standards are relevant for that to meet that specific requirement. That is GRA 305, PAN 3052, and 3053. So we have identified and mapped that for meeting this disclosure requirement, you have to report on these three disclosures under GRA standards that require following calculating GHG emission by following the GHG protocol standard, and then you can meet that specific requirement in the PSX primer. And then under another example of that, there was environmental impacts. The metric was under this category was environmental impacts that require any legal or regulatory responsibility for an environmental impact. Yes or no? If yes, it requires companies to explain. So we have identified that this is relevant to GRI 3. That is material topic, determining the material topic, that how company, what are the material topic for the companies, as well as how company manage those material topics. For identifying if there is a environmental impact are mostly relevant for the companies. So companies have to come up with their responsibility and identifying, they have to see how they are involved with that, with those impacts, and then how they are managing, whether there is a responsibility from the regulatory perspective, or whether there is a responsibility from their self-imposed responsibility. So we have identified that disclosure 3-3 sub-requirement B and C are relevant for this meeting this specific disclosure. B was relevant because requiring the organization to report whether the organization is involved with the negative impacts to its activities or as a result of its business relationship. And C requires that describe policies or commitments regarding the material topic that by companies managing that specific material topic. Under social category, we have again identified two examples. The first metric was gender parity ratio at workforce, which required percentage of women in the workforce, including women at executive management level versus the rest of the workforce. So we have identified that GRA standard 4 or 5, diversity and inclusion, diversity and equal opportunity is relevant to meet that specific requirement of this ESG metric. It required two disclosures for the governance body as well as there is a ratio of basic salary information on women and men. So 4052 of ratio of basic salary ratio men to men was relevant. In addition to that, as well as 4051 was also relevant, keeping in view basically the you can say disclosure about the diversity of the governance bodies as well as the diversity of the employment employees as well. How many female members are present at the board level and how many female members are present in the executive workforce. But there was percentage related disclosure was not available because it specifically required the percentage disclosure. So percentage was not available in GRS standards, but other disclosure was available there. Then we have another metric, healthcare benefits. PSX requires that you have to report on does the company publicly publish, follow a policy for health issues and indicate where it can be assessed, where it can be accessed. So we have identified that it relates to two different GRA standards. GRA 2, that is the general disclosure, and GRA 403, that is the occupational health and safety standard. So we have identified that in the GRA standards, there is a specific requirement of strategy, policies, and practices, where it requires the policy commitments that what are the company policies for managing its impacts and how those policies are, where those policies are available and how those can be accessed and whether these are as well as supplies and how company embed those policy commitment within its operation as well. And we have seen the policy commitments provide link to the policy commitment. This C requirement was relevant for that specific disclosure requirement. And under GRI 403, we have identified that under 403, there is a promotion of worker health was relevant as well, where companies are required to promote worker health. And we have identified that GRI 403-3 occupational health service that is more relevant for meeting that specific requirement of that, whether there is a policy or how company manages the occupational health and safety services of the employees. So we have identified these two disclosures are relevant. And in addition to that, 403-6 was also relevant. That was promotion of workers' health. That in addition to occupational health and safety, how companies contribute or how companies facilitate general health services for the for its workers, for its staff. That may be through insurance, or that may be through medical facilities at the company as well. Under governance category, we have identified against have two examples. There is a metric was gender diversity on board, percentage of board seat taken by women. So we have identified there are two disclosures for that. That is the general disclosure under GRI 2 and GRI 405 diversity equal opportunity as well. So we have seen identified that disclosure 2-9 that is relevant to the governance structure and composition. It required companies to describe its governance structure by the historic governance body, by gender, as well as by independence, by tenure, and so on. So it was relevant for that how many seats are occupied by the female members at the board. And in addition to that, GRI 4051, that is the diversity of governance bodies and implies it also requires that company report on diversity of its governance bodies, its management staff, and its workers by gender, age group, and other indicators of diversity. So these two relevant disclosures are relevant for that. And the last metrics for the governance category was bribery anti-corruption code. It required companies to specifically report on does the company publish and follow a bribery anti-corruption code. So we identified there are three disclosure GRI standards are relevant for that specific disclosure: GRI 2, 3, and GRI 205. That is anti-corruption. So under GRI standard 2, the two we have identified that 2-23 policy commitment A and C are relevant. That requires that companies have to report on how it is relevant for what are the policy commitments for its responsible business conduct and where these policy commitments can be accessed. Then disclosure 3-3 requiring that how company manages its impacts, that managing its impacts from the perspective of having policies and procedures. So it is under C, there is a C category that requires policies, commitments regarding the material topic for that. If that is topic material for the company, they have to come up with the policy and procedure. And under the 20-5, there is against communication and training about anti-corruption policies and procedure, that how the policies and procedure training has been communicated to the governance body members as well as to the staff. So these three disclosures were identified relevant, and these were referred in the index. So having a little view of the GRI of the linkage document, that how it looked like. This is under category. We have we have 5 columns. There is a PSX ESG primer, is the matrix, then measurement, annual basis, and then GRS standard, which standard is relevant, which disclosure is relevant for that specific standard for our item. Under social, the same with yes matrix, then it's measurement, that means annual or measurement method, then GRS standard and which disclosure is relevant. And where there is something missing, we have mentioned that this percentage related disclosure is not available, or number of hours and community investment percentage, pre-tax profit not available. So this sort of missing factors are also identified. Under governance category as well, we have identified that for the voting results, PSX required that disclosure of the voting results of the latest AGM. So there is no specific GRI standard for that, neither GRI disclosure available. So we have mentioned that this disclosure is not available. I guess we have completed. So we can have questions.
थैंक यू इमरान सर। आई थिंक मैं तो किसी ने कहा था कि उर्दू में अगर बोल, मैंने कहा थोड़ा उर्दू में बोल लेते हैं। मैंने कहा कि थैंक यू इमरान साहब। आई होप कि ये सेशन जो है थोड़े सा जो, बिकॉज लोगों को समझ में नहीं आता कि ESG है क्या, क्या होता है, कैसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को फॉलो करना चाहिए, क्या स्टेप्स होने चाहिए। तो शायद ये हमारी तरफ से, PSX की तरफ से थोड़ी सी कोशिश है कि हम, ये हमारा 13वां सेशन है कि जिसमें हम कोशिश में है कि हम सिखाने की कोशिश करें, बताने की कोशिश करें कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस कैसे ना सिर्फ अपने आप को बल्कि और अपनी सराउंडिंग्स को कैसे स्ट्रांग रख सकती हैं, टेकिंग इनटू कंसिडरेशन एनवायरमेंटल, सोशल और गवर्नेंस के एस्पेक्ट्स में। अगर इफ द ऑडियंस, अगर किसी के कोई सवालात हैं, दे आर वेलकम टू मेंशन इट ऑन द Q&A सेक्शन। सर एक सवाल है कि can you elaborate more about the scenario analysis?
Scenario analysis, should I speak in English or Urdu?
सर जो आपको बेहतर हो, बिकॉज एक साहब थे,
Okay.
उन्होंने कहा कि तो एनीथिंग इन विच यू आर ओके विथ, आप
Okay. A scenario analysis is basically a tool through which companies identify its resilience. there are different scenarios available at the moment. There is a 1.5-degree scenario because this is specifically linked toward the climate change. There is a UNFCCC scenarios are available, that is the 1.5-degree or 2-degree scenarios. And for carrying out this scenario analysis, company has to have information about the population, about information about some assumptions about the future revenues, then the future trends that how company are going to invest in that specific category. Keeping in the 1.5 to 2-degree scenario, you have to see that how these patterns will emerge in the longer run and how these are going to be impact companies. If you take an example of scenario analysis from the perspective of E&P sector, taking into account the 1.5-degree scenario, emissions need to be reduced, or you can say at a greater speed. So that requires E&P sector companies that to take into account 1.5-degree scenario, and we see that okay, where E&P company will be standing, what will be the resilience for that company in specific scenario there. So this will come about the at 1.5 degree, there will be a significant decrease in the emissions, and to match that significant decrease in the investment in the emissions, company has to either make investments in the to carbon capture through sequestration, through you can say carbon acquiring carbon credits, through identifying these opportunities to of reduction in emission. They have to change their business model. So scenario analysis is basically you can say assumptions based analysis that help the company to identify that keeping in view these scenarios of 1.5-degree or 2-degree scenarios, where will it be standing in the future? How it is going to be in the shorter run, in the medium run, and the longer run, and how it have to adopt the strategies, how it have to make a resilient strategy to align with that specific scenario requirements.
Thank you, sir. And next question is, as you have mentioned, there are various standards in Pakistan dealing with sustainability. That is SCCPs, PSX, and a voluntary reporting under BCSR of ICAP and ICMAP. Also, recently S1 and S2 were made mandatory. So, which of the standard is comprehensive enough to meet the minimum requirement of all the governing bodies, that is PSX and SCCP?
As I have already mentioned, there is no one standard available that can meet these requirements. If you see the PSX and SECP ESG disclosure requirements that have been at the moment voluntarily, that are not covered in under IFRS 1 and S2 solely, and that are not covered under the GRS standard as well. At a complete perspective, although disclosures are covered, but keeping in view the impact risk analysis, which we are already discussing about the governance, then impact risk and opportunity perspective, and then metrics and targets. So companies have to make a blend of these both. If they are going to just focusing on the GRI, they are going to miss the investor community perspective. And if they are just focusing on the IFRS 1 and S2, that is keeping in view the financial community perspective only, they are going to miss the broader perspective as well. So the better approach for the companies is that they should adopt the IFRS 1 and S2 in combination with the GRI, because previously it was on the card that IFRS 1 and S2 is going to replace GRI or the impact reporting, and there will be only financial reporting will be prevalent. But that has been now negated, and at the global level, there is a two-pillar reporting concept is now going to prevail. That is the impact reporting and the financial reporting. So if the companies are already have adopted this impact reporting perspective, they are in a better position to adopt this IFRS 1 and S2. But if they are starting at the moment, so they have to, at the start, they have to focus on keeping these both, because these will help companies to just not only meet the requirement of investor committee by IFRS 1 S2 only, but the regulators requirement as well. That is the from a responsible organization perspective that has been promoted by the SECP as well as through the PSX primer of PSX as well.
Thank you, sir. So next question again, if a company is making its sustainability report under GRI standards and also works on S1 and S2, whether it covers, matlab ये है कि does it cover all parameters of PSX report?
Yes, yes. Keeping in view whether those material topics, that those disclosure requirements which have been required by the PSX are the material topic for the company. I just like take an example of anti-corruption. PSX requires there is anti-corruption, anti-bribery policy. But if there is no material topic of anti-corruption in the company sustainability report, so then they have to see that, okay, fine, to meet this specific requirement, we have to add the disclosure. But if those disclosure items are available in the company's existing report, yes, they will be well aligned with the GRI with the SECP as well as the PSX primer. There will be minor 1 or 2 addition factors will be there.
Thank you, sir. So next question, is carbon reporting mandatory for listed companies?
Not at the moment, but with the promulgation of IFRS 1 and S2 that is expected in the coming year, it will become definitely, because when they have to comply with the IFRS S2. That requires they have to report on the emissions, the climate-related risk and opportunities, and under the metrics area, they have to report on scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. For the first year, there is relaxation of scope 3, but ultimately they have to go for that scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, and that will become definitely mandatory.
Thank you, sir. So next question, the three tables you flashed in the end for ESG, did the tables include all the required PSX ESG metrics?
No, those were just examples. Those are not, those doesn't contain the specific disclosure requirements. You have to refer to the disclosure document which I was earlier sharing, that is available on our website as well, and that have been shared with PSX as well. So that document contains the complete detail of the disclosure requirement of the PSX primer, and then their linkage with the GRI standards. And the same sort of document for PSX, for the SECP ESG guidelines are also available on our website.
The next question, what standard a company should adopt?
It depends. That company has to see that what is the purpose of starting this journey. If to start the ESG journey, they have to look over what are the regulations that are going to be implemented on that specific sector, on that specific company. And then what are the investors' requirement, if there are some specific investor requirements. Or in addition to that, there may be some specific customer requirements as well. If that is the export-oriented company, they have to take into account the customer requirement as well. If they're not export-oriented, they have to see the regulatory requirements that are upcoming, as well as the broader investor perspective. So then they have to choose that, okay, fine, I have to choose these two, because there are a lot of standards available. We've seen there are SDGs, there are WF metrics, there are some SCSB standards, integrated reporting framework. And these are basically journey to start with, that the companies should start, and then they can build on that specific their journey, and they can adopt different standards or different disclosure requirements to showcase that how better they can present their company's sustainability story, as well as their impact and their risk and opportunity perspective.
To the next question, thank you, sir, for जिन साहब ने appreciate किया है for holding this session. उनका सवाल है sir कि is double materiality is specific to European sustainability reporting standard or only at, or local companies which are working on ESG data are also moving towards it, as it will affect the whole priority analysis? इनका एक question है.
Yes, primarily it is applicable in Europe. At the mandatory perspective, you can say that ESRS. But when companies have to you can say apply these two disclosure requirements of IFRS 1 as well as an impact reporting. So companies should come up with the double materiality to have only one materiality perspective, and then they can move toward meeting the requirement of financial materiality and the impact materiality. So it is good approach to have those, because while working in silos, something is financial material and something is impact materiality. Although impact materiality will be translated into the financial materiality at a later stage, but may not be material at the shorter run. So they can come up with the analysis that these are the impact materiality or financial materiality perspective, and how these are expected to become material in the shorter, medium, and longer run. And the companies have started to adopt these practices in Pakistan. Previously, some companies have started that they are showcasing that how these material topics, what are the impacts of those material topics, what are the risks and opportunities of those material topics, and as required by the IFRS, they're discussing that when they expect that these will become a material risk for the company, whether in the shorter run, in the medium run, or in the longer run, and where it is going to be happening, that is within the supply chain or within its operations. So, but because it's a new concept for the financial community perspective as well, so it is going to be refined over the years. But it's better to have, while conducting the analysis, better to have the financial materiality as well applied while determining the material matters.
As we go towards the end, yes, our second last question is, will it be SECP that will mandate carbon reporting for listed companies?
Yes, Because when SCCP will promulgate the IFRS 1 and S2, that will automatically mandate that carbon reporting for the companies.
And sir, before that, thank you so much for joining us for this session today. And क्या कहते हैं, all this presentation and this session will be available on PSX's YouTube page in a few days from now. Now towards the last question, जिसका आंसर मैं भी दे सकता हूँ कि उन्होंने पूछा कि आर देयर एनी इंसेंटिव्स और रिकग्निशन प्रोग्राम्स बाय PSX फॉर कंपनीज दैट कंसिस्टेंटली रिपोर्ट हाई क्वालिटी ESG एंड SDG डेटा, एंड इफ सो हाउ कैन कंपनीज पार्टिसिपेट? सर पहले आप कहते हैं, फिर मैं एक पॉइंट मेरा मैं भी कह दूंगा।
I guess you will be in a better position to comment on that.
सर अब
Because although
सर एक एग्जांपल चले मैं बता देता हूँ कि हम हमारे यहाँ जो लिस्टेड कंपनीज हैं, हम साल में एक इवेंट रखते हैं टॉप 25 कंपनीज अवार्ड्स के। उसमें हमने जो बेस्ट कंपनी परफॉर्मेंस में 10% वेटेज हमने दी हुई है ESG और SDG के उस पे। अगर वो कंपनी उस पर पूरा उतरती है, उसके बेसिस पे हम उनकी जो मार्किंग कैटेगरी है उसमें 10% वेटेज का क्राइटेरिया है, और जो कि टॉप 25 कंपनीज के अवार्ड के उसको, यानी कि वेदर इट फॉल अकॉर्डिंग टू इट और नॉट, उसके उस पर 10% वेटेज होती है।
And I can add on that. In addition to that specific weightage or specific award from PSX, that is basically translated into the financial return for the company as well in form of new opportunities, while showcasing that you have well-established systems, that you are managing your impacts, you are understanding those risk and opportunities, and you have well-established systems to identify and to manage these issues. So it becomes the companies become more, you can say, resilient in that external environment, and that creates a better opportunity for the companies.
चले, thank you so much sir, thank you for joining us. And अगर किस the people who want to watch this session again, we'll upload this session on our PSX YouTube page in a few days from now. And thank you so much, and keep learning. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Thank you.